A whole lot is happening on the continent concerning COVID-19. South Africa, which is the biggest hit, is having a hell of a moment as countries across the world, especially in Europe and even in Saudi Arabia, have placed some travel ban to and outside South Africa. What's this thing about this new type of COVID-19 as a strain? How well can the vaccine help in eliminating this new type of COVID-19 in the UK and in South Africa? These are some of the concerns on the continent today on Village Square. Welcome, I'm Sulaiman. More than 2.5 million cases, close to 60,000 deaths, wailing economies, lost jobs, disrupted lifestyles, shrunken financial powers, distorted social behavior. Africans have hardly recovered from a first wave of COVID-19, and now the second wave has struck with growing numbers of case incidences and faster transmission of the disease. A new strain of the coronavirus has been pinpointed as the cause of the new spread. Now, shops are closing again, nations are shutting their borders, and the mood is a mixture of anger, fear, and sadness. Most this is happening at the Yuletide. What looked like the end has suddenly become the beginning again. How long this will last, we may have to wait and see. Well, joining me to look at dynamics of this second wave and the newly discovered strains, Dr. Peter Imoesi, a research fellow at the University of Aberdeen, Scotland, United Kingdom. Good to have you join us again on VSA, Dr. Imoesi. This isn't looking really good. You are in the UK. First, tell the continent what exactly is happening in the UK at the moment so that we can have a better understanding of what we are dealing with.
Thank you for having me, Sulaiman. I think here in the UK, we're kind of in a mix right now because we are going back to more stringent lockdowns. And that's the fact that there's a new strain that was identified just a couple of days ago. So I think right now, both respective, for instance, our own university, which is the University of Aberdeen, we're going back to impute more restrictions, stringent measures at the same time to ensure that we contain this particular spread of the new variant of this particular SARS-CoV-2. So life is a little bit difficult for people in London. From the news I read recently, people actually fled London to neighboring city because of the stringent lockdown that is going to be imposed in London. So we are kind of in a very mix right now.
You know, this is really strange. I'm excited that you're here again because I recall you were, one of the very first in the world to talk about a couple of other issues that are playing out now. First, we heard about herd immunity from you. We also talked about, you were specific about the need for the world to get a vaccine. Let's put this side by side with the new strain of COVID-19, because the main fear here is that it is coming just as the world thought that we finally have a vaccine. Will this be affecting the joy and hopes we already have all over the world?
This is a very kind of tricky question, right? So the new strain we have now, from the research we've seen, which is from the Genomic Consortium of the UK government, the publication was saying that basically this particular strain has no significant effect on the spike protein. So the spike protein is where you have the particular virus using to entry into the human host. So for now, the word here is for now. We're a little bit safe that despite the new strain we have, the vaccine we have at the same time, we are still in good hands for now. But if there is any more mutation that may likely alter that particular spike protein, then I would say we're heading for a darker days ahead of us. So for now, the vaccine, we are still very much happy that that can actually be effective for this particular pandemic. Now, when we look at this whole scenario, what happened to this particular variant we have right now? From the hypothesized theory from the same paper, they were saying that this particular strain may have resulted from an individual who has a chronic disease, and this allowed the virus to mutate over time. So, and that brings the fear in Africa, basically. So when you look at Africa, for instance, you know that, for instance, in Nigeria or a couple of other African countries, we are not really adhering to non-pharmaceutical interventions. And if this particular virus is right there in our system, it means that we are giving the virus the opportunity to develop more machineries to be able to survive going forward. And if that happens, it means that Africa will be the next breeding ground to bring in this new strain that may likely, what here is made, and may likely alter this particular spike protein. And in the end, the vaccine may not be effective. But for now, the vaccine is still likely to be effective to this particular strain we have now.
You know, I just realized, listening to you, one thing comes to mind, and that's the mask. It looks like, for instance, if this had emanated from someone who already had some, disease, and he contracted the virus, perhaps there is a mix. Now, I'm trying to see how I can break it down to the everyday language. So it now has culminated into what we have said. So if that individual, for instance, had this on, would that have saved the entire world from getting that mutation, from one person to the other?
You're quite correct, right? So the non-pharmaceutical interventions, for instance, the face mask you have with you there, actually play a role. But the thing with this particular variant we have is that first it stayed in the human. So this is just an hypothesis, right? So it stayed for longer period in a chronic patient. So that gave this particular virus the opportunity to keep mutating. And for this particular variant we are told that we have about 20 mutation in the particular genome of this variant. But back to your explanation about the face mask. Basically, if this particular individual had a face mask on, that will serve as a protective shield from transmitting this virus to the next individual. That is one. If this individual or individuals do engage in hand washing, frequent hand washing, or hand sanitizers, again, that will also shield this particular virus from getting out. Then also, if this individual or individuals actually maintain social and physical distancing, again, we won't be here right now. But there's the other side of the argument where scientists are trying to say that there was the initial variant, I think around mid of this year, which is the B117. And initially, this opera that, this particular variant is highly transmissible. But over time, what we discovered was the fact that this particular variant occurred in the mid-2020 was because people were traveling around and moving around Europe. Of course, this particular variant that I'm referring to came out from Spain. So because people were moving in and out between countries within Europe, that led to that particular spread. So it was not that that particular variant was highly transmissible. It was because people were moving that particular variant all around the world. And that brings us back to this new variant we have right now, which is the B117. Now, for this particular variant, scientists are also saying that we should not be so scared for now. It may be the fact that because people have relaxed their guards, that's why we now have this increase or this surge in the number of cases we have in the UK, basically. So as studies are ongoing, we will be able to find out in the next couple of days or weeks or months, because research is a little bit slow and what have you. But we will be able to find out if, for instance, this particular variant is highly transmissible, or it is as a result of people adhering to these non-pharmaceutical interventions and basically moving around without any form of face mask or what have you.
You know, the two things here really come to mind. It has to do first with the adherence to the COVID-19 protocols, and again, people all over the world, not just Africa, letting down their guards, thinking that the days of COVID-19 was near until this, and for some of the people, like in the UK, I think the UK is getting into the tier 4, and that's something to be worried about. Is it in us human to maybe over time get used to something that is as dangerous as COVID-19, to the extent that we just want to do away with, the restrictions and mix up freely?
So you're correct, right? But this has to be looked at on several angles, because first, we're dealing with humans here, and you have to consider the human behavior. For me, as a scientist, it's easy for me to adhere to these non-pharmaceutical interventions and what have you, because that is where I'm trained to follow protocols and procedures. When you bring that into a normal convention, which is the society, at initial stage, I'm sure you realize that even back there in Nigeria, you had people on social media arguing with scientists, trying to tell you what the facts are, what the facts are not. But over time, you saw that the interest on this particular virus from the general populace kind of dwindled. So they lost interest, basically. And that's where we come in as researchers. So for us, we have the tenacity to keep going, despite it kind of broken us over time. But when you look at the UK, I'm a little bit kind of worried, right? Not just for the UK as well, but for especially Africa. So this particular variant we have, the issue is if this variant emerged because of the presence of that particular virus in this individual for a long period, if you try to compare that or you juxtapose that with what is happening in Africa, for instance, in Nigeria, you could deduce that what if the non-adherence to the non-pharmaceutical intervention will lead to this particular virus staying continuously in individuals. And what you are helping to aid basically is that you're trying to help the virus to develop new mechanism for survival. So this strain we have, this variant we have right now is not because this is the variant that was in individual. It is because the survival for the fittest occurred in that particular patient. So these then emerge. So you're going to have the scenarios playing out in Africa, where if we allow this virus to stay within us for a long period of time, more and more variants will likely emerge, and that will then compromise all of our efforts since the beginning of this particular pandemic. And I can give kudos to people as well, because I know it's not easy to stay at home. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their loved ones. The livelihood of people is eroded completely. And with these scenarios you have, it's really difficult to tell people to adhere to these rules. But if we need to get out of the woods, then we have to play our own part individually and collectively as well.
We'll take a moment. When we'll come back, we'll be talking about, testing for, COVID-19. Okay, side by side with some of those restrictions that have been put in place by countries on the continent, and see what best of practice every human can bring to bear, more now that we are getting into the Yuletide, when we return. Well, quite frankly, Village Square Africa never left the COVID-19 matter. We had to dive in again now that a new strain has been uncovered. We've been speaking with Dr. Peter Imoesi, who is a research fellow at the University of Aberdeen. And of course, joining us now is Dr. Moses Masika, who is a virologist from the University of Nairobi, Kenya. Dr. Masika, good to know that you're there. Quickly, let's jump in because something kind of worrisome news coming from Kenya. As we understand that the health workers are on strike over inadequate protection and benefits. What worries every African is how soon can we start treating our health workers as very important assets? Isn't this too risky at such a delicate period for the health workers to be on strike? Dr. Masika.
Thank you for having me. Yes, indeed, this is a terrible situation where all healthcare workers, from doctors, nurses, clinical officers, and what have you, out in the streets, and for very reasonable grounds that they gave a long notice for. And it's not surprising because across Africa, we've really not treasured our healthcare workers, despite the fact that we have very few. Globally, we only have about 3% of all healthcare workers as compared to a burden of about 25% of all global disease burden. So we are really understaffed and a lot of issues with morale. And when these strikes occur, they sort of keep driving nails into a coffin that we should be addressing at this point. And I think it's really sad that today somebody can walk into a hospital and not get care because healthcare workers are out in the streets for grounds that could actually be addressed if somebody cared to sit down with them.
Dr. Masika, let me stay with you before I go back to Dr. Imoesi. You know, the thing here is that if the UK and South Africa, two of the worst hit countries of the world, have discovered new strains, aren't there possibilities that more may be discovered soon? Because listening to what Dr. Imoesi was saying, it looks like African researchers like yourselves should really dig deep and make some outstanding breakthrough to save the continent and humankind. Tell us your thinking of this new strain and how the continent is dealing with the development.
I think there is an element of panic, which is a bit exaggerated. What we should have is concern and caution. And I say that because the so-called new strain has been around since September. In fact, in parts of England in mid-October had 25% or a quarter of the cases being caused by this strain. And it's just been announced a week ago that it's now causing most of the cases, about 6 out of 10. And that is what has caused a lot of panic. But really, this disease has been circulating in England at least for maybe now close to 2-3 months. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the rest of the world. And I say this because out of all the viruses sequenced so far, there's about 250,000 sequences in a database we call GSAID. And in that database, more than half are from Europe, and a big chunk of that is from the UK. The other place that we discovered this strain is South Africa. If out of the 250,000 strains in the database, only 5,000 are from Africa. So that's like 2%. And out of those 5,000, half are from South Africa. Countries like Kenya have sequenced very few. And this means that we are underrepresented. We do not have enough data across the rest of the world to say that this strain is not present. What we can say is that it's a new strain. It's a relatively new strain, but it's been around for a while. It's causing concern, but it shouldn't cause panic. And my view is that, you want to say something? I could stop.
Yes, because I think what you're saying definitely resonates with Dr. Imoesi here. Dr. Imoesi, let me bring you here quickly. I recall then it was you who said Africa isn't testing enough. Perhaps we have more than the numbers bandied about. And for Dr. Masika, he's saying perhaps we just might have this new strain, more than the numbers that the world is, talking about at the moment. Tell us about, our testing abilities and level on the continent, Dr. Imoesi?
If I'm to respond to that, basically, I think when it comes to the testing in the continent, we are not actually really doing enough. It's clear. And from what your guest also explained a while ago, you could see that even when it comes to sequencing this particular virus, we're not really there as well. So if you have just 5,000 among the number that is sequenced in the database, it's not because you don't have the variant or you don't have the strain in Africa. The point is, first, you don't have the manpower. Two, you have a minimum or a few number of experts who are able to do this job. And three, you do not really have the required infrastructure or the machinery to go about this particular sequencing of the virus, as it were. So based on that, you could also see that it's also kind of flipping over when it comes to our testing as well. Recently, I checked on the worldometer to check how far most of the African countries are doing when it comes to testing. You could see that countries in East Africa, Central Africa, and what have you, they are not really testing at all. Some have only tested just 52,000 of some population of 5 million. And right there in Nigeria, you also know that when it comes to our own testing, we've not even hit 1 million tests in the last 9 or 8 months of this particular pandemic. And for instance, if you've not tested enough significantly, where you have a population of 200 million people, you could say emphatically for sure that people actually do have this virus, and this virus is actually going around the population. For reasons we are not so clear about, or a few of the reasons we do know, is the fact that this virus has not taken a firm grip as it was initially predicted, basically. So if this virus are taking a firm grip as predicted initially, I think it's going to be a different story altogether in Africa.
Dr. Masika, let's look pretty much more about the continent. Do you see the continent and the world overcoming COVID-19 in 2021?
Well, overcome is relative. I think we are going to degrade it considerably. We will not eliminate it from the world or the continent, but now that we are getting into vaccines, we are likely to be able to resume close to normal business as the most vulnerable are immunized and the rest of the population is immunized. But COVID-19 is going to be here for quite a period because the number of people infected so far are going to be a reservoir for infecting others. And we know that we'll not be able to immunize everybody in a few months. It's going to take a while. So I see that we will degrade the pandemic, but our ability to immunize as many people as possible in the coming year is what will determine what happens after that. But generally, COVID is going to stay with us for a while in some form of the other.
Well, this is actually to both of you. Let me start with Dr. Imoesi. Does it worry you when you hear, such skepticism from Africans concerning the vaccine? Some still think it is, a weapon by the West to actually depopulate the continent.
Well, it worries me, actually. So if the vaccine is actually a weapon to depopulate a continent, if you know fully well, you're in the media, when it comes to the people who are the worst hit, it's still the West as well when it comes to the number of cases, deaths that we see around the world. So, of course, we're trying to develop a vaccine to save the entire world and as well the Western nation as well. So I think these all myths going around and the fear is not just in Africa as well. You also have people even within the United States, Europe as well, where people are also skeptical about this particular vaccine. But the point here is this. I think we need to be very, very much open when it comes to vaccine. Because, for instance, the Pfizer-Moderna vaccine is a new technology. So you need to educate the people of what it entails, what is the context of this particular vaccine. And based on that, you're going to build the confidence of these people. And at the same time, you saw what happened with the Vice President of the United States, where he took a jab of the same vaccine as well. So if you have African leaders doing the same thing back home, taking the vaccine themselves in public, it's going to build that public trust. And again, it will erode any form of skepticism or fear among the population. But just to drop this finally is that My worry is this new variant we have right now, it got so close to the spike protein. Now, what happens at the spike protein with this new mutation is that it enhances high specificity of this particular spike protein to bind effectively to the entry point. So we are lucky that it hasn't changed that particular entryway. If we keep going like this, flouting all the non-pharmaceutical intervention, we may not be lucky. So my advice to every single one is be serious with this virus, be serious with this pandemic. It is here. And if we need to get it out of the window, we have to work in one unity.
And for you, Dr. Masika, you know, perhaps you must have seen some Africans who will still say, I remain a Thomas, I will not believe. Even if I see it, I just might say, well, what has just happened on live television might be something quite different that has been given to Mr. A and B, but what you're about to give to me is something poisonous.
Yes, indeed. One of our biggest enemies for this vaccine is going to be misinformation. Unfortunately, we can't just wish it away. We have to counter it with the correct information, and our governments have to invest in informing the population that by the time a government, be it Kenya or Nigeria or any other government for that matter, licenses a vaccine, they've looked at the data and they know the vaccine to be safe, at least from a reasonable level of certainty. And from that point of view, we may not convince everybody, but we should get most of the people on board and deliver the vaccine safely. The other thing we need to continue doing, as my colleague has said, is that the vaccine is not going to be the end of things, that even after receiving the vaccine, we still need to keep taking the measures of keep avoiding social contacts or physical distancing and masking and hygiene and sanitation. All these are going to play a part, not just the vaccine. But I think we have to counter the misinformation. Otherwise, we may be fighting a losing battle if a majority of the population does not believe the vaccine to be safe. It's really interesting because if you ask any of these skeptics what evidence they have to claim to support the claims they have, really there is no evidence. It's all a matter of conjecture and rumors. But we cannot afford to ignore it because there are very funny videos going around and they tend to spread virally and get to most people quicker than good information does.
Well, I'm excited. We have come to the end. Gentlemen, I must thank you both for being such nice company on the program. Definitely, we'll stay in touch with both of you because first, you are Africans and you're experts in this field. Africa needs you. And of course, well, who best? Moses, Peter, something biblical about both of you being on this show today as we move towards Christmas. Many thanks for being such nice company. We hope that we can keep the conversation tomorrow and in the days ahead. So the second wave is on as the number of case incidences surge daily in the continent. Citizens of various countries are advised to stay safe, stay at home, help limit the spread of the virus, even as you celebrate. I'll see you tomorrow.